the parents are the problem, and how do we get the parents there, and do we see this? And we do. And a lot of times people will say, well, you're preaching to the choir. But the choir needs practice and needs rehearsal. And I think that well, let me go back to, there's one school that I work with each year in one of the towns in Connecticut, and I work with the middle school students. There are about 5 other schools and towns represented every year when it's kind of a conference when we get together. And this one school repeatedly every year says, you know, bullying really isn't a problem in the school. It used to be. And we say, well, what do you do? And the other students say, well, what do you do in your school? And I say, it's just, there's no more bystanders. There's no more that we're going to have students who just look and don't say anything. We actually stand up, and you can see it in the hallways that we stand up for one another. And it's very rare that if someone does something to hurt another person, that someone will not jump in and say, don't do it. And we say, well, how do you know? And they said, well, the principal is there to make sure that if something happens, there's a consequence immediately. And the teachers, we all talk about the same language, and they check up on us a lot. And it's just, we know that we have the principal, we have the teachers, and we have the students. And now it's become a culture in our school. And I really, truly believe that if you can get where you have the administration, the teachers, and the students together, and maybe you don't have all the parents, but that's going to spill over into their everyday lives. So I know that if we can work as a team in the school, and if we can make up our mind that this is our goal, not we're going to do it in September and check it off, but this is going to be our goal, and we're going to transform our school. So we are allies, not just the students, but the teachers also, and administrators. I do think that we're going to see a change.
Yeah, so I thought you were going to tell me a story of denial, you know, but that is good. I mean, and that's what you do need, because then children feel safe.
Exactly.
Then they know, if I go and tell the principal or my teacher, they aren't just going to say, deal with it.
Exactly.
It's all part of growing up. Deal with it.
Right.
And this, like I said, in my teaching career, I dealt with it. But I think I was saying this to you before, in the process of dealing with the maladaptive behaviors, you can't teach. And you have to deal with those first, and then get the classroom on target.
And then the test scores will go up.
Well, the test scores, you know.
No, but in all seriousness, I think that one of the goals for us, too, is to really make it known how important this kind of change is to the education of the students. Because when you have disruptive students, and you have students who aren't passing the CMTs and all of that, why aren't they passing it? And if you look at it, what in readings that I've done, and even the schools that I've been in, a lot of the students, some of them have even come up to me after a program that I've done and said, you know, either thank you for coming, I thought I was alone, but these are the students that the teacher said, watch out for them because they're horrible. You know?
Yeah.
And I did an assembly once. We went and said, this is the worst freshman class we've ever had. They never listen. 250 students. So I went into this assembly, 2 hours I was going to be with them by myself, thinking, oh, you know, hopefully I could get them. They were silent the whole time because it was about something that they felt and were experiencing. And then we have an open mic, and they come down to the open mic and they start. It's the dialogue.
Okay, so that was one of the things I was going to ask you about. Were the children, you know, intimidated or willing to say, yeah, I got it. You know, the other day, there's this kid here who he constantly wants my money for lunch, and so they were opening up.
Well, this particular that we had just done was at a high school, and Jason starts off playing the piano on stage really loud, and then he jumps off of the stage and says, do you know, is it Mozart Concerto? And does anyone know it? And then he says, because for me, this was caused me a lot of problems in high school. And then he really starts talking about his personal story. Throughout, it's his personal story and relating to what's going on in high school. By the time they come down for the open mic, and it's very interesting because I've done these assemblies many other times, but when it's Jason moderating, they really turn the open mic and they have a one-on-one conversation with him. And it's they're speaking from their heart, and it's very interesting that all of a sudden all the students just get up from their seats and they line up to come up for the open mic time.
And that's what it takes. It takes one person to tell their story, and then that person doesn't feel like an alien from outer space anymore. I read somewhere that, you know, those every once in a while we do get those incidents in they're terrible, where students go and they just kill, you know, their teachers and, you know, kids, and yet they've found out that these kids, when they've left notes behind, felt themselves to be bullied. And that they just weren't going to take it anymore. And so it's kind of interesting that it's a syndrome. And that's what we have in this country. Not that bullying is a new, modern, you know, problem. It isn't. You know, it goes all the way back to Cain and Abel, if we want to say that. And what we were saying in our last show about violence is that certainly the media does not help us to diminish violence. We know that children see, and I got a statistic here. Imagine this: the average American child sees 200,000 violent acts on television before they're 15 years old. Now, I know the kinds of children I worked with in Hartford not only saw those on TV, they saw them in their neighborhoods. They saw them in their homes. And I'm not just saying that as a statistic, because I lived in the same neighborhood these kids came from. And I would see those things myself. What kinds of things, not that talking isn't important, I think that's the beginning of awareness, is when we're able to flesh out the words. What kinds of things do you think kids want to have happen for them in schools?
You know, we did and you had asked us earlier, what do you do in assembly? Do you do classroom? And we follow up our assemblies with a 4-hour workshop with smaller groups of students. And we do a action plan with them at the end. What do you want to see happen in your school? And one of the first things is educate the teachers, because they don't feel supported by their teachers. And something that we recognized in doing this over and over is that there's a difference between the student's perception and the administration and teachers' perception. So you have statistics that say 75% of teachers think that they do something to stop bullying. 25% of students think teachers do something. So which one is right? Well, they're both right. Teachers, when they see it, do it. But students, who probably see more than the teachers do, think that the teachers don't support them. That's one of the first things, is to get everybody on the same page. And one of the things we found is when teachers tell their story, then the student goes, oh, I can trust. You know, so I think that's the big thing that came out of, and it's also not labeling. You know, we've been in schools where their issue was that they were labeled the bad class, so why not be the bad class? You know,
or the bad student, and so them saying to us, I came back over the summer, I've changed so much, yet when I came back in September, their view of me is still the same, that I'm this bad person. And I said, but I'm not a bad person, and I want to change so badly, but I'm stuck in the perception everyone sees of me and who they think I am. So there's a lot with the labeling.
And what would you say is, have you done any